My father only looked at me when he had something to criticize. That was just the way it was in our house. Growing up, I learned to make myself small, to eat quickly, answer briefly, and disappear before anyone noticed I was there. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just Tuesday. My name is Daniel. I'm the younger son. And in my family, that title carried about as much weight as a receipt you find in the bottom of an old coat pocket. Technically real, but nobody knows why it's still there. My brother Carter was everything I wasn't. At least, that's how the story was always told. Carter graduated top of his class from Georgetown Law. Carter passed the bar on his first attempt. Carter sent money home at Christmas. Carter called mom every Sunday. Carter, Carter, Carter. His name was a weather system in our house. It preceded him, filled every room, and lingered long after he left. I left home at 19. Not dramatically. I didn't slam a door or write a letter. I just packed a bag, took a Greyhound to Columbus, Ohio, and figured out the rest from there. My father's parting words, delivered over the top of his newspaper, were, "Don't come back asking for anything." I didn't. For the first 2 years, I worked doubles at a diner on 5th Street. I smelled like maple syrup and dish soap constantly, and I was okay with that. I was learning something at that diner, though nobody there knew it. I was watching. I watched which customers came back. I watched what made people feel seen. A remembered name, a coffee refilled before they asked, a booth saved without being asked. I started writing things down in a spiral notebook I kept in my apron pocket. Customer behavior. Service gaps. What people actually wanted versus what they said they wanted. It sounds small. It wasn't. During my off hours, I took free courses online, UX design, product development, basic coding. I wasn't a genius. I wasn't fast. I failed certifications twice, sometimes 3 times before passing them. But I kept going, not because I had a plan, but because sitting still made me feel like I was proving my father right. Eventually, I got a junior position at a small tech startup in Columbus doing customer experience research. I was the lowest paid person on the team. I answered to everyone and was consulted by no one. But I kept my notebook habits. I kept watching gaps. Places where businesses were bleeding customers not because the product was bad, but because the experience felt cold, impersonal, like nobody was home. I started building something on the side. A platform. I'll call it what my co-founder and I eventually named it, Anchor. It was a customer retention tool for small businesses. Simple dashboard, behavioral analytics, automated but personalized re-engagement. The kind of thing a family-owned restaurant could actually use without hiring a data scientist. We started with 7 beta clients, all local, all skeptical. Within 14 months, we had over 400 clients in 11 states. I didn't tell my family. There was never a moment that felt like the right one. And honestly, part of me, the part that had been made small for so long, wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I trusted the thing I'd built yet. I wasn't sure I trusted myself. Then my brother called to tell me he was getting married. Her name was Simone. He'd met her in DC. She worked in venture capital, specifically in early-stage tech investment. Carter described her the way he described all things he valued in terms of credentials. Top of her class. Partners track. Impressive portfolio. I said I was happy for him. He said mom wanted everyone home for the engagement dinner the weekend before Thanksgiving. Everyone, including me. I hadn't been home in almost 3 years. I drove the 7 hours myself, which gave me a long time to remember why I usually didn't. The house looked the same. It always looked the same. My mother kept it like a museum of a particular kind of American success story. Framed degrees on the wall, a cabinet of Carter's trophies from high school, a Christmas card photo on the mantle every year that I was conspicuously not in after age 20. Dinner was at 6. I arrived at 5:50 and let myself in through the back door. My mother hugged me in the kitchen. It was a real hug. She was always warmer when Carter wasn't in the room yet. She smelled like the same lavender lotion she'd used my whole life. For a second, standing in that kitchen, I was 12 years old and the world hadn't sorted us all into winners and leftovers yet. Then Carter arrived, and the gravitational pull shifted. He came in the front door with Simone, and the house reorganized itself around him the way it always did. My father stood up from his chair, the first time I'd seen him stand up voluntarily in memory. My aunt, who had driven 4 hours from Pittsburgh, actually clapped. My cousin took a photo. Simone was warm. That was the first thing I noticed. She moved through the room differently than Carter. Less like someone arriving and more like someone genuinely curious about where she'd landed. She shook my hand and looked me in the eye in a way that felt like she was actually registering who I was, not just checking a box. "You're Daniel," she said. "Carter's talked about you." I smiled. "Don't believe everything you hear." She laughed, and I filed it away. She had a real laugh. The kind you can't perform. Dinner was served at 6:30. My mother had made everything Carter liked: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. It was a Thanksgiving rehearsal and a Carter appreciation dinner rolled into one, and I ate quietly and let the current carry the conversation wherever it wanted to go. It wanted to go, as it always did, to Carter. His firm's expansion into a new practice area. His apartment in DuPont Circle. A case he couldn't discuss, but everyone could tell they were supposed to ask about. My uncle asked. Carter deflected precisely enough to make everyone feel like they had been trusted with something. My father leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms in the way that meant he was proud. I recognized the posture. I had never caused it. At some point, my aunt turned to me with the energy of someone completing a checklist. "So Daniel," she said, "what are you up to these days?" The table didn't exactly go quiet, it sort of held its breath. "I've been working in tech," I said. My father's expression didn't change. My mother refilled someone's water glass. "Tech," my uncle repeated. The way people repeat a word when they want to make clear they find it insufficient. "Like, computers? IT stuff?" "Product development, mostly," I said. "Daniel always liked computers," my mother offered, which was both true and somehow the most diminishing sentence in the English language. Carter said nothing. He was cutting his pot roast with the focused calm of a man who had already won and knew it. My father set his fork down. Just for a moment. Just long enough to say, "You still with that startup thing?" "Yeah," I said. He picked his fork back up. That was it. That was the whole conversation. I'd been assigned my corner of the room and was expected to stay in it. Simone had been quiet through this exchange, but I noticed she wasn't eating. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately read. It wasn't pity. It wasn't the polite blankness people put on when they're waiting for an awkward moment to pass. It was more like she was running something through her memory, checking it against what she was seeing. Dessert was my mother's apple pie, which was the one thing she made that I genuinely loved. We moved to the living room, and Carter and my father settled into their usual rhythm: case strategy, interest rates, the inevitable fantasy football detour. I sat near the window with a cup of coffee and said very little. Simone came and sat next to me. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly enough that it stayed between us. "Sure," I said. "The startup you're with," she said. "What's it called?" I looked at her. There was something deliberate in how she asked, not casual small talk. She was asking the way she probably asked in meetings. Measured. Specific. "Anchor," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Customer retention platform," she said slowly. "Started in Columbus. Series A last spring. 4.3 million. I held my coffee cup with both hands. "Yeah." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're the co-founder," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. She exhaled once through her nose. A quiet exhale, not dramatic. The kind that means someone is recalibrating. "We passed on you in the first round," she said. "My partner thought the market was too fragmented." I disagreed. "I've been watching your retention numbers for 8 months. She paused. "I told my firm 3 weeks ago that if you do a Series B, we need to be in the room." I didn't say anything. I looked at my coffee. Across the room, Carter was explaining something to my father, who was nodding slowly. My aunt was on the couch looking at her phone. My uncle had fallen half asleep in the armchair. It was an ordinary family evening. "Does Carter know?" Simone asked. "No." She looked across the room at him, then back at me, with an expression I didn't try to interpret. "Why didn't he say anything?" she asked. I thought about it. I thought about the question genuinely, the way I hadn't let myself for a while. "I didn't think it would matter to them," I said. "Not really, not in the way things need to matter to make it into this room." She was quiet. "That's a hard thing to know about your family," she said. "Yeah," I said. She glanced over at Carter again. He was laughing at something my father said. He looked happy. He was happy. I didn't want to take anything from him. I want to be clear about that. Whatever existed between my family and me, Carter's engagement wasn't the place for it, and I wasn't there to turn over stones. But Simone had asked, and I had answered. A few minutes later, Carter drifted over. He looked at Simone with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own life, which he was, and which I didn't begrudge him. What are you two talking about over here? Simone glanced at me once. Just getting to know your brother, she said. Carter clapped me once on the shoulder, a good-natured gesture, perfectly performed. Daniel's always been the quiet one, he said. The family introvert. He said it warmly. That was the thing about Carter. He said most things warmly. It didn't mean they didn't land the way they landed. I smiled and finished my coffee. Later that night, after the dishes were done and my aunt and uncle had driven back toward Pittsburgh, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my father. It was brief. He was rinsing his coffee mug. I was looking for my keys. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You doing okay out there?" It might have been the most direct question he'd asked me in a decade. "Yeah," I said. "I'm doing okay." He nodded once, looking at the sink. "Good," he said. That was it. I drove back to Columbus the next morning. 7 hours. I stopped at a rest stop in Zanesville, got a bad coffee, and sat in my car for a while watching people come and go through the glass doors of the building. Families, mostly. Truckers. A few solo travelers like me. I thought about what Simone had said. Not the business part, the other part. That's a hard thing to know about your family. I had known it for a long time. Long enough that it had stopped feeling like grief and started feeling like weather. Something you dressed for. Something you didn't expect to change. I thought about my father's face at dinner when Carter deflected that case question. The pride there. Uncomplicated and full. I didn't want to make him proud by becoming Carter. I understood that clearly now, sitting in that parking lot with a bad coffee. What I had built for other reasons, not to prove anything to anyone in that house. I had built it because of the woman at the diner who always ordered black coffee and sat alone every Sunday morning. Because of the family restaurant on 3rd Street that closed after 15 years because they couldn't figure out why their regulars stopped coming back. Because I had sat in 1,000 waiting rooms and known what it felt like to be invisible in a place that was supposed to see you. Anchor wasn't a revenge story. I needed to remember that. I got back in my car and drove the rest of the way home. 3 weeks later, Simone emailed me directly. She used my professional email dash, which she'd found herself. The subject line was, Series B conversation, when you're ready. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my attorney and my co-founder. We had the first meeting in January. I haven't told my family. Maybe I will someday. Maybe my father will see something. An article, a mention, a number that translates into the language he understands, and recalibrate. Maybe he won't. I've spent enough of my life waiting for a verdict from that room. What I know is this: somewhere along the way, without announcing it, without asking permission, I became someone. Not the someone that room would have predicted or rewarded or even recognized. A different someone. The quiet kind that doesn't need the room to go silent to know it's real. Because the room going silent, that's not the victory. The victory was every morning I got up and showed up and built something anyway. In the years when nobody was watching and nobody cared and the only person keeping score was me. That's the thing about being invisible for a long time. You learn to be your own witness, and eventually, if you keep going, that turns out to be enough. If you've ever sat at a table where everyone around you was being seen and felt like a ghost at your own life, drop a yes in the comments. I'd like to know I'm not alone in that. There's something I've come to understand slowly. The way you understand most things that actually matter, not all at once but in pieces, over years while you're busy doing something else. The world doesn't reward noise, it rewards consistency. It rewards the person who shows up on the days when showing up feels pointless, when there's no applause, no acknowledgement, not even a question asked in your direction at the dinner table. What Daniel did wasn't remarkable, because it ended with a room going quiet. It was remarkable because of every morning that came before that moment. The mornings nobody saw, nobody filmed, nobody celebrated. That's the part people miss when they look at a story like this. They see the reveal and think the reveal is the story. It isn't. The story is the diner shift that ended at midnight. The failed certification. The notebook in the apron pocket. The years of building something in the margins of a life that a family had already decided didn't count for much. That's where character is actually formed, not in the moment it's recognized, but in the long stretch of time when it isn't. What Daniel's family did wasn't unusual, and that's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. Families sort their members early, often without meaning to, and those early labels are extraordinarily hard to undo. The child who is told, through words, through silence, through the particular way a father doesn't look up from his newspaper, that they are the lesser one, will spend years carrying that weight. Some people collapse under it. Some people, without realizing what they're doing, start building something just to have something that's entirely theirs. Something that can't be taken away by a dinner table verdict. That's intelligence working in the right direction, not the intelligence of test scores or credentials. The intelligence of self-knowledge. Understanding what you're actually good at. Understanding what problems you can solve that others can't see yet. Understanding that being underestimated is not the same as being wrong, and there's something else in this story worth sitting with. Simone didn't stumble onto Daniel's work by accident. She found it because she was the kind of person who looked carefully, who trusted her own judgment even when her partners disagreed, who spent 8 months watching numbers because she believed what she saw. Two people who had both learned to pay attention to things others overlooked. They recognized each other in the margins of someone else's celebration. That's how it usually works. What you build in quiet tends to find other people who operate in quiet. The real connections, professional, personal, the ones that actually move your life forward, rarely happen in the spotlight. They happen in the corner of the room, in the conversation nobody else was listening to. If you've ever been the person at the table who didn't get the question, who finished their meal without being asked a single thing about their life, I want you to hear this clearly. That silence was not an assessment of your worth. It was an assessment of their range of vision. Those are two very different things, and only one of them is yours to carry.